Bray Wyatt is back in WWE, but which brand will he primarily be based on? We've got the news on that. Plus, the Good Brothers, Kyle Anderson, Luke Gallows, they're also back. We've got the news on which brand they'll be working on too. We've seen the returns of several free agents recently to WWE, but what other free agents could be set to return to the company? The Rock has something to say about Roman Reigns amid all of these WrestleMania 39 rumors. We've got the ratings for Raw this week. Plus, speaking of ratings, why was WWE going to go back to TV14? NXT was last night, and we saw a main roster star appear on the show, and it's not the only main roster NXT crossover we're going to be seeing going forward. R-Truth, who's his new tag team partner? Plus, this Vince McMahon Vice documentary. We've got all of the details and more in today's WWE news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of WWE. If you couldn't tell by that intro, it feels like the intros are getting longer and longer and longer and longer because there's always so much world news to get into in the world of WWE right now. Let's start off talking about Bray Wyatt. Of course, Bray Wyatt's back in WWE, and Bray Wyatt has been advertised for this week's episode of Friday Night SmackDown on Fox. Now, he did briefly make a bit of a cameo appearance this past Monday on Raw, but which brand is Bray Wyatt going to be assigned to? Yes, there is still a brand split somewhat. It's very loose, but there are still stars associated with certain brands and making the majority of their appearances on said brand. And according to reports via PW Insider, Mike Johnson is reporting that Bray Wyatt will be part of the SmackDown roster in WWE. Now, as noted, Wyatt made his on-screen return to the company this past weekend at Extreme Rules. Wyatt had been gone from the company since his release in August of 2021. Now, actually, this will be the first time once he begins wrestling on SmackDown in a really long time, because one of the last times Wyatt was actually in a SmackDown ring was on October 9, 2020, when he defeated Kevin Owens. Now, Wyatt's last match before his overall WWE release was against Randy Orton at WrestleMania 37. At the time, he was actually on the Raw brand, so his final appearance, that Firefly Funhouse segment in the Raw After Mania in 2021, came on, as I mentioned, Monday Night Raw. But Bray Wyatt is going to be on SmackDown, which would make sense. Look, Bray Wyatt has got so much buzz around him right now. He's got so much discussion and so much intrigue surrounding him, the White Rabbit stuff, the QR codes, the cryptic teasers, the videos. What's his character going to be? Is there going to be a Wyatt 6 faction? Like, what does Bray Wyatt have in store for us going forward? And whilst Monday Night Raw is the flagship, whilst Monday Night Raw is the older show, whilst Monday Night Raw is the longest running weekly episodic television show in WWE history, SmackDown nowadays is the A show. And the reason it's the A show is because it's on the bigger network. It's on network television as opposed to cable television. It's on Fox as opposed to the USA Network. Fox has more viewers. Fox is a bigger platform. And SmackDown gets the most ratings. SmackDown is the most watched, the most viewed professional wrestling program on television right now. It's getting 2.2 to 2.5 million viewers every single week. So with the investment that they've made in Bray Wyatt, with the intrigue surrounding Bray Wyatt, and with that reaction that he got this past Saturday at Extreme Rules, it only makes sense he would be on the biggest show. Now, the concern, and I guess the worry for some people with anyone that goes on the SmackDown brand is there's another person on the SmackDown brand that is dominating that brand, and eventually everyone faces off against, and eventually everyone loses against, and that is none other than Roman Reigns. In fact, Roman Reigns, the previous Universal Champion before Roman Reigns, was none other than Bray Wyatt, of course. Bray Wyatt defeated Braun Strowman in SummerSlam 2020. That's when Roman Reigns made his return. 7 days later, Roman Reigns became the Universal Champion, and he's held onto the championship ever since. Now, I'm still of the mindset that I think someone like a Cody Rhodes will probably defeat Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship, but wouldn't it be poetic? Just think about it. How poetic would it be if the person to take the Universal Championship off Roman Reigns was actually the person that held the championship before Roman Reigns, and during that period of time, he had been fired and rehired and brought back? That would be such a story. That is such a story. And I know Cody Rhodes being the one of the founding members of All Elite Wrestling, to be the person that defeated Roman Reigns. Wouldn't Bray Wyatt being that person as well? Wouldn't that be a massive story too? So there's a few different avenues they can go down, but certainly initially Bray Wyatt should be nowhere near Roman Reigns. Nowhere near, because that match doesn't need to happen anytime soon. Bray Wyatt needs to do his own thing. And if anything, we saw in the past with how it worked out with The Fiend and Bray Wyatt last time, does Bray Wyatt even need to be in the championship picture? It complicates things a lot. So that's certainly interesting when it comes to Bray Wyatt. He's going to be on SmackDown. In contrast, the Good Brothers, they're going to be on Monday Night Raw. PW Insider has also noted that Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows will be assigned to the Raw brand. Gallows and Anderson last match as a tag team on Raw was on January 27, 2020 in a 2-on-1 handicap match against none other than Drew McIntyre. Now, they ended up losing to Drew McIntyre because at the time, of course, with Vince McMahon, I've said this a million times, Vince McMahon does not care about tag team wrestling. He doesn't. He just, to him, it was useless. You know, anytime there was a bit of a revival in the tag team wrestling scene, it was happenstance. So that just goes to show you've got, at the time, I don't know if they were the Raw Tag Team Champions at the time. They might not have been. But still, having an established tag team lose to McIntyre, who I understand they were building up, is just ridiculous. But nevertheless, Gallows and Anderson made their WWE return during Monday Night's Raw in Brooklyn, New York, to reunite with AJ Styles. During an in-ring segment, Styles appeared to give in to Finn Balor and pretend to join the Judgment Day. Gallows and Anderson then ran down to the ring to help Styles even the odds and fight off the Judgment Day faction. Now, before making their WWE return, Gallows and Anderson had been gone from the company since their release in April of 2020. Their last appearance in WWE prior to said releases was in that Boneyard match at WrestleMania 36, The Undertaker's final match before retiring. Now, we do have a little bit more information about Gallows and Anderson as well, it must be said, because a lot of people, myself included, were talking a lot about what does this mean for New Japan Pro Wrestling, because we knew that they'd finished up with Impact, but the plan was that they were booked up until January. They were factored in and featured into New Japan Pro Wrestling plans until January, until Wrestle Kingdom. Of course, Carl Anderson actually has several Never Openweight Championship matches scheduled. He's still the Never Openweight Champion. However, you could then say, well, how did this deal come together? Well, the reason this deal came together is because the Good Brothers aren't under contract to anyone right now. They're not under contract to New Japan Pro Wrestling. They've just been booked for those dates. They just agreed that they would do those dates. That's how, and that's why they have been able to actually sign with WWE and return to the company. That's how this has all happened. So, in a bit of an update to those wondering, okay, does this mean WWE has a relationship now in New Japan? What's Carl Anderson going to do? Is he going to vacate the Never Openweight Championship? What's going to happen? So, Carl Anderson has claimed to Fightful, according to Sean Ross Sapp, that he's still planning on working the Tokyo Dome show. Also, Fightful have been told by those in WWE that New Japan were indeed given a heads up that they were going to be appearing on Raw and had signed with WWE. So it would appear that this isn't a case of New Japan being blindsided. This wouldn't appear to be a case of New Japan going, wait a minute, one of our champions on WWE television and we had no idea about it. By all accounts, the Good Brothers informed New Japan this was going to happen. It would appear, at the very least, the Good Brothers, specifically Carl Anderson, is going to make the dates he had scheduled or had been announced with New Japan. As far as them working the Tokyo Dome and Wrestle Kingdom in January, who knows? I mean, who knows how long this WWE deal is for? This could just be a situation where they come in to work this feud, this storyline with the Judgment Day. I would suspect it's probably a bit longer than that, but we'll have to wait and see. But having a contracted WWE star appear at Wrestle Kingdom, that would be certainly historic and certainly something we'd have never seen under the Vince McMahon regime, certainly. Now, we've seen a lot of free agents return in recent weeks, but several more could be set to return. The returns have included the likes of Karrion Kross, Dexter Lumis, Johnny Gargano, Candice LeRae, Bray Wyatt, and many others, like Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows on Raw this week. Now, WWE could be adding several other names to that list. Speaking on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer said, quote, Mia Yim, obviously her husband is in AEW, Keith Lee. Paul Levesque is trying to get everybody back that he had before in NXT that got fired when he didn't have power, and she would fit into that category. I know WWE has interest in Matt Taven. Of course, Matt Taven's just finished up his run with Impact Wrestling, as have several of the Honor No More stars. Vincent was backstage at the show Raw tonight with Dutch, so obviously there's some interest at some level in those two as a tag team in WWE or maybe NXT or whatever. As I mentioned, Mia Yim was released by WWE in November last year before having this run with Impact Wrestling. Her last appearance was at Bound for Glory. She was defeated by Mickie James as she finished up her run there. Matt Taven, of course, is a former Ring of Honor World Champion. He's held tag team titles in both Impact and New Japan Pro Wrestling. And Vincent and Dutch, as we touched on yesterday, appeared in Ring of Honor as the tag team The Righteous, where they held the Ring of Honor World Six-Man Tag Team Championships with Bateman. I would assume Vincent and Dutch would probably be in NXT. Probably Matt Taven as well. As far as Mia Yim, she'd probably come straight back to the main roster. Meltzer also mentioned that WWE has shown interest in former NXT North American champion Jonah Bronson Reed, who of course has been working in New Japan Pro Wrestling as of late. I don't know if he's got a contract with New Japan, but he's being pushed very, very heavily. He's even won matches over the likes of Kazuchika Okada. So that might be a bit of a difficult one to pull off, but people thought the Good Brothers were going to be a difficult one to pull off, so certainly anything's possible there. Talk about The Rock. The Rock and Roman Reigns, that's been a match earmarked for WrestleMania, or certainly rumours for WrestleMania next year, Hollywood, possibly the last chance The Rock could actually step inside of a WWE ring to wrestle. You've got Reigns on this historic run, calling himself the head of the table, this family. It just makes so much sense, doesn't it? Now, The Rock recently spoke about his cousin's reign recently, where he acknowledged the tribal chief, praising him and the Usos' work on SmackDown, but that appears to be where he draws the line. The Rock spoke to E! News' The Roundtable ahead of the release of his new Black Adam movie, where he was asked just who really is the head of the table. The Rock said, quote, "Who is the head of the table? Without saying any names, you're looking into his eyes right now." The Rock was then asked if he wanted to go ahead and confirm that he would be wrestling Roman Reigns at WrestleMania next year, to which he said, quote, "I am not confirming that at all. No, I'm not. I know I'm going to get a text from him after he watches this." Do I think this will happen? I think that Roman Reigns wants it. I think WWE wants it. And to be honest, I'm sure to a certain extent The Rock wants it. It's a case of, can they fit it in? What's The Rock's schedule look like? They have wanted, I always say this, they have wanted The Rock to wrestle a match at WrestleMania for the last, this would be WrestleMania 39. So he last wrestled, ironically, a decade prior. Would have wrestled last time a decade prior at WrestleMania 29. And every year since then, they've wanted him to have a match. They wanted him to have a match. He was scheduled to have a match at WrestleMania 30 against Brock Lesnar, but he got injured at WrestleMania. They couldn't shoot the angle the following night. They wanted him to have a match at WrestleMania 31. He couldn't do it because of commitments. He did show up, though. They wanted to have a match against Triple H at WrestleMania 32. That's why Triple H beat Sting. He couldn't do it. WrestleMania 33, I think there was at least discussion of possibly having a match that year because it was in Florida, where The Rock's from. WrestleMania 34, the original plan was The Rock and Ronda Rousey versus Triple H and Stephanie McMahon to build on that segment that happened at WrestleMania 31. They've wanted him every year, but he's not been able to do it because of his commitments to his filming schedule. So it does feel like this would probably be the last time he could possibly do it. He's getting older now, and Roman Reigns will probably never be in this spot again, where he's this red hot, where he's got the belts and he's been undefeated for 2 years, etc. So now feels like the time, and it's just a case of, can The Rock find the time? We'll have to wait and see. Raw, of course, was the season premiere this week, and as expected, the ratings saw a boost because of that. The season premiere of Raw roped in some good numbers following the newsworthy Extreme Rules Premium Live event. WrestleNomics shared viewership information for Monday night, and the October 10 episode of Raw was watched by an average of 1.824 million viewers, which is up 14% from last week's Extreme Rules Go Home episode. Raw also scored a 0.55 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic. That is a massive 38% boost from the prior week, and both of these viewership numbers are the highest the program has seen since September 5th. Now, ranking-wise, Raw came in 5th in the key demographic among cable originals for broadcast primetime, and the show was 7th for the evening. Of course, no guess as to what was the leader in terms of cable television on Monday night. That would be Monday Night Football. It was a game between division rivals Las Vegas Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs. Going back a year, Raw viewership is up considerably. The October 11, 2021 episode of Raw drew an average of just 1.582 million viewers, 13% lower than last night's episode. Monday's Raw was also up 24% in the key demographic from last year's episode, which only had a 0.42 rating. So it must be said that that's seen as a success. To get 1.8, just over 1.8 million viewers during this time of the year, Monday Night Football season is very, very good for Raw. They had to jam-pack the show. It must be said, it was a very newsworthy show. It had DX, it had Brock Lesnar, title changes, the fallout of Extreme Rules, the Bloodline. There was a lot going on in that show. Can they sustain it next week? Probably not. We'll see a drop-off next week, but this is football season. And as I keep saying, as long as that Raw keeps delivering good content, then the people that are watching the football will come back, and Raw will be positive for it once the football season ends. So I think Raw was very good this week, so I think they deserve praise for that. WWE and TV14. There was a report earlier this year that WWE could be moving back to a TV14 rating, and while WWE has nixed those plans to become TV14, a new detail has emerged about the reason the change may have originally been proposed. It had been reported that the show was set to become a TV14 product once again, beginning on the July 18, 2022 episode of Monday Night Raw. However, an update from PW Insider in late August revealed that plan had been abandoned. According to Dave Meltzer on the Wrestling Observer radio show, this is due to WWE not wanting to upset advertisers following the departure of Vince McMahon from the company. Andrew Zarian has also provided more information about the original plans on Twitter in response to a tweet done by Wrestling Inc. about the holy shit chants on Raw this week. By all accounts, Andrew Zarian tweeted, quote, "This was one of the reasons behind WWE wanting to go to TV14. Now, there was a lot of censoring this past Monday night on Raw. And it must be said, that's not the first time that's been reported. I believe Brian Alvarez had actually said that previously, that WWE wanted to move to that rating just because you can't really control what the crowd's going to say. They just couldn't be bothered to bleep it all the time or censor it all the time. And I thought it was ridiculous, to be honest. I know people can get upset about their kids watching programs and it's a PG product and they're saying shit in the background, but how offensive is that word nowadays? That's what that's a wrestling crowd. Like, that was a good crowd Monday, and it was a good crowd at Philadelphia. What would you rather them do? Sit there and say nothing and go, well, that's PG? No, come on. I can, unequivocally say as a kid, I watched WWE, I watched ECW, I watched WCW, whatever, and I went back and watched old wrestling, and I heard people curse, and it didn't warp me as a child. Go outside. It's not television. Go outside and just walk the streets for 5 minutes, and you'll hear people saying all sorts of stuff. I'd be more worried about what's being said on social media as opposed to the television, because that's far, far worse. So, I don't know. I thought that censoring stuff was ridiculous. NXT was last night, and Sonya DeVille's back on the developmental brand. SmackDown star Sonya Deville shocked fans when she attacked Alba Fire during last night's episode of NXT. After Fire won her match against Toxic Attraction's JC Jane, she was attacked by DeVille, who was hiding in the crowd. It didn't take long for Jane and her tag team partner Gigi Dolan to join in the attack. The segment ended with the trio smashing the former NXT Women's Champion through an announcer's table with a Shield-esque triple powerbomb. Now, later on in the show, during a backstage segment, DeVille told Mackenzie Mitchell that she and NXT Women's Champion Mandy Rose are still friends, and she wants to face Fire next week on NXT. In the past, Rose and DeVille had been teamed together under the team name Fire and Desire. They had a bitter feud following their breakup, which led to Sonya Deville leaving WWE. At the time, that was SummerSlam in 2020. Now, Rose and Fire have been feuding for several weeks. The feud escalated last week after Fire abducted Rose. Fire announced Tuesday that she will be facing Rose to a title match at Halloween Havoc on Saturday, October 22nd. So, surprising to see Sonya Deville there. Of course, we know the reason for Mandy Rose's absence. She had a family bereavement, which is incredibly sad, and obviously thoughts go out to the family of Mandy Rose at this difficult time. And maybe it was just because of that. Maybe it's because Sonya Deville isn't doing all that much on the main roster right now. And I know people will see a move back to NXT as a demotion, but a lot of the time, if they're not doing anything, they'd rather go back just to wrestling. If they're not going to be on television, if they're not going to be on live events, like Apollo Crews. Now, the guy won the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania last year. Now he's back in NXT. Like that, it happens. Go back to NXT, get a fresh coat of paint, get over once again, or just wrestle and then come back. There's nothing wrong with that. So Sonya Deville and NXT, I'm all for it. Now, we're going to see quite a few main roster stars on NXT next week. Grayson Waller announced a stipulation for Cora Jade versus Roxanne Perez's grudge match at Halloween Havoc. He also informed the two females that they'll be wrestling opponents of their choosing on the October 18 episode of NXT. Waller made it clear that the entire WWE roster is fair game, implying that Jade and Perez could wrestle main roster superstars if they choose. Now, on last night's episode, it was confirmed that Jade will be wrestling a Raw superstar and Perez will be wrestling a SmackDown superstar next week. Of course, this is whilst NXT goes head-to-head against a special Tuesday night edition of AEW Dynamite. Now, fans on social media have been speculating on the various main roster talents that could show up, with names such as Shotzi and Bayley being proposed as potential opponents. Furthermore, several other main roster superstars are expected to show up next week, as two of the matches will include mystery names, with Joe Gacy and the Diad will wrestle Cameron Grimes and two mystery partners. Channing Stacks Lorenzo will also wrestle a mystery opponent next week. Of course, Sonya Deville has been back in NXT, which we just spoke about just then. So it would appear that ahead of going head-to-head with AEW Dynamite, they're going to load up NXT with some of those main roster stars, certainly. So that's going to be certainly very, very interesting there as well. It was also reported as well by Mackenzie Mitchell that Roxanne Perez, she spoke to Roxanne Perez earlier, who said that her DMs had been blowing up with stars wanting a piece of Cora Jade, so much so that Roxanne Perez would be going to SmackDown this week. So Perez will also be appearing on the main roster. Roxanne Perez will be on SmackDown on Friday night. This, of course, follows where Carmelo Hayes appeared on Main Event this week. He picked up a victory over Cedric Alexander, and R-Truth picked up a victory over NXT's Von Wagner. Similar bookings were carried out the week prior with Josh Briggs and Brooks Jensen getting a victory in a tag team match against Shelton Benjamin and R-Truth, and Fallon Henley going one-on-one with Dana Brooke, also walking away with a victory. According to a new report from Fightful, the WWE fans can expect more crossover between the various brands in the company. When it comes to Main Event in particular, it will be common for NXT's rising stars to appear on the show so they can get more eyes on them as they progress in development. Using Main Event as a platform to see how NXT stars fare in front of a larger audience isn't a new concept. The company utilized similar tactics while still under the Vince McMahon leadership, and we can expect more in the coming weeks. So if you think that that means that, you know, Carmelo Hayes is getting a call up soon, possibly, but I think this is just part of this increased synergy between Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, while still firmly utilizing NXT as a developmental brand as opposed to a third brand, which was reported before. Now, I did touch on R-Truth just then, and according to Fightful Select, R-Truth is now officially paired on WWE's internal roster with none other than former Hurt Business member Shelton Benjamin. As of this recording, there's no given team name for this new team of Truth and Benjamin. Interestingly enough, Benjamin and Truth had been recently wrestling each other a bit on Main Event, with Benjamin defeating Truth back in August before Truth got his revenge a month later. The series was ultimately settled at a house show in October where Truth defeated Benjamin, but they then, as I mentioned, teamed up as an official tag team, taking on those NXT talents Brooks Jensen and Josh Briggs. So they didn't get the victory, but it would appear that WWE is just doing the thing of two veterans. They're now a tag team, pal. They're going together. So R-Truth and Shelton Benjamin are now a tag team. Finally, Vince McMahon, this documentary, The 9 Lives of Vince McMahon. We've got a bit of an update as to what could be covered in it. And now featured on the documentary will be WrestleNomics' Brandon Thurston, and he had an interview with Nick Hausman of Wrestling Inc., and he revealed how his participation came around, as well as who else producers have contacted for the documentary. He said, quote, "A producer reached out to me in August. I want to say I don't know July or August, and I went on there in late August and recorded 2 hours of an interview with them. I expect about 45 seconds of my face to probably end up in it. My understanding is they're going to include a lot of footage that they've already used in the Dark Side of the Ring series, but I know they've interviewed, I think others that they've been interviewed include Dave Nelson, Brian Alvarez, Brian Solomon. I think even Vince Russo was interviewed or was going to be interviewed, is my understanding. I imagine there'll be, like I said, talking head stuff from previous episodes of Dark Side of the Ring." It was also asked about what would be covered. Thurston said, quote, "I have no idea what the final edit will look like. Like I said, I recorded 2 hours of the interview and we talked about it all. Vince's entire life story. I don't really know what the narrative is going to be that they're going to pull out, but we talked about everything. Go back to Vince's childhood, Vince growing up, and Vince getting into the wrestling business, Vince making it big with the WWF in the 80s, and talked about the business in the 90s. I talked about everything. So I imagine that's reflective of it will be Vince's entire story, as much as you can tell in 2 hours. Now, when it comes to will Vince's exit from WWE, will this hush money payment scandal be covered? Thurston said, quote, "I think so. I don't expect it to be heavily influenced from a WWE point of view. WWE had their shot with the Netflix documentary that they didn't pull out in time before all of this scandal broke this summer. I expect it to give a good account of his life, and especially the last several months, how he fell from grace in WWE. So they're going to cover it all in this Vice documentary. But there you go, guys. That's the latest WWE news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's WWE news in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.